Well, I think we should introduce you first, right? Because there might be people that are watching this and they're like, who is this guy sitting next to the guy that's always interviewing people? And this is Jesse, right? This is the Wizard of Oz, right? This is the guy that nobody ever sees. They might hear you laugh. But yeah, man, like it's been a cool little adventure that we've been on so far, right? And a lot of people. Hey guys, if you're listening to the podcast, if they're hearing this, they're obviously listening to the podcast, right? Right? If you're enjoying this podcast or you just want to support the podcast, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, turn on the notifications. Thank you for the support. Sorensen's also has a Modesto location located at 1433 Coffee Road. Modesto, true value for all your hardware needs. For all of our people out in the Modesto area, please support those who support us. Thank you. This podcast is brought to you by our friends at Sorensen's Ace Hardware, located at 402 Washington Avenue in Los Banos. Proudly serving the community since 1947. Please check out our friend at Sorensen's for all your hardware needs. Come on, guys, support those who support us. Thanks, Sorensen's. This podcast is brought to you by our friend and realtor, Naomi Townsends with Keller Williams Property Teams. She'll help you in every step of the way, whether you're buying or selling a home, commercial property, mobile home, or even a vacant lot. In the last few years, she's helped hundreds of families buy their dream homes in the Central Valley, Bay Area, Monterey, and even the Sacramento area. Check her Zillow profile where she has a perfect 5-star ranking. She is also bilingual in Spanish. In 2021, she was in the national top 2 in her brokerage. Please, guys, check out her Instagram, Sold by Naomi, or reach out to her at 408-623-1414. All the links are in the bio. Remember, guys, support those who support us.
You gotta get uncomfortable to get comfort.
There's some help. It ain't on the way. It's already waiting for you.
This little pill right here could take over your life. And I found that out the hard way. Mission statement of this podcast highlights stories of people that I've met in my journey in recovery. Probably don't know, but like this was your brainchild, right? Like this was your idea to do a recovery-based podcast.
Yeah.
Right? And we're actually doing this for a couple of reasons, right? Number one, people are probably wondering more about me because I'm always asking other people questions, not really sharing much about myself.
Yeah.
Right. Number two, I'm busy as fuck at work, and we don't have a guest lined up for this week, and so this is what we're doing, right? So it's like Jesse interviewing me.
Yeah.
Or me and Jesse talking, or maybe me interviewing Jesse.
Something.
Yeah.
Like, I know that because your story is a lot different from people that you've had on and interviewed.
Yeah, I mean, in ways, right? In a lot of ways, it's different because I'm an individual, and in a lot of ways, it's the same, right? Like, the stuff that people in recovery deal with. You talk about like the trauma, the feelings of like less than, the shame and the guilt.
Yeah.
Right. That number one, get people to start using, but number two, like keep me using, right? Until it gets so bad that I got to change. Like it's all the same, but it's in different packaging. Right.
Yeah.
Like for me, like when I came into recovery the first time, I really had a hard time feeling like identifying, right? Like recovery is like a big process of identification, right? Like, and I didn't identify with anybody, right? Like all I could see was the differences, right? And I thought just because I wasn't homeless or I did my drugs different than you, right? Or my drugs were different than your drugs, that I didn't belong in recovery, right? Like I didn't. I never shot heroin, right? I don't belong in fucking recovery, right? Like I'm not fucking homeless, right? Yeah. Like my family still wants me around, right?
Yeah.
But towards the end of the last run, I wasn't really helping anybody, right? Like everybody around me kind of had enough of the shit I was doing, right? And so I don't know. It's back to your question. Yeah, my story's a little different than some of the people we've interviewed, but still very much the same, right? In a lot of ways. my sponsor sometimes calls me like the Mary Poppins of addicts, right? All right. I spent one night in jail, guys. All right. All right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's funny. Like, I mean, I don't know. We could just get into it. Huh? Like I've been clean for almost 7 years now, right? My clean date is June 19, 2016. You know, the question I would ask somebody, like, what does that mean to you, right?
Yeah.
People are like, what does that mean to you? My kids fucking mock me. My wife, what does that mean to you? Right?
Yeah.
But, man, it's like it's everything to me. You know, and I've heard people explain it as, like, it's the most important day on their calendar, right? Like my birthday doesn't really mean as much to me as my clean date, right? My clean date is the day that I made an active choice to change my life, right? It was an important decision that's altered my life from that point forward, right? Like, and on that day, it wasn't like, you know, like it wasn't a great day,
Yeah.
right? I didn't feel good. I was coming off of opiates, right? Like that's never a good feeling. But I've had a few clean dates, right? And like this is the one I decided to keep, right? Like this is the one that like in my mind, you know, I feel like I don't ever have to use anything again to change the way I feel, right?
Yeah.
I got it tattooed all on the inside of my arm, right? I showed my sponsor and he was like, "Oh, that's a commitment," right?
Yeah.
But you know, regardless, like to me, it's the most important day on the calendar. I mean, of course, my kids being born and all that stuff, you know, amazing. I don't remember dates. I'm not good with dates. I barely can remember my wife's birthday and my kids, right?
Yeah.
But besides that, I'm horrible with dates. But like this is a date that I'll hang on to for the rest of my life, right? In one form or another, my life changed on that day, right? I can no longer claim ignorance anymore, right? I know that I don't have to use drugs until the fucking day I die, right?
Yeah. And how do you, like the one thing I mean, we know each other on a personal level, and we pretty much talk to each other almost every day. Like, how do you deal with, I don't really hear you talk about like the urges and the cravings. Right?
No,
because they're still there, right?
No, I wouldn't say so. The desire to use has been lifted, right?
Yeah.
Like somewhere along the process, I can't exactly identify the date, right? Like, but I don't have the desire to fucking use anymore, right? Like, I spent like years of my life like not waking up, right? Like coming to.
Yeah.
Right, like I wouldn't wake up like a normal person. Oh, it's time to get my day going. Roll out of bed, you know. Like it was pretty fucking bad towards the end, right? And I know today that like putting something in my body to change the way I feel isn't gonna change any of the shit that's going on in my life, right? It's not gonna make anything better.
Yeah.
If anything, it's gonna make it worse, right? Do I think about it it's weird how it works. Like you would think like, you know, like, oh, a big tragedy happens, right? Like, oh, maybe they'll think about getting high, right? Like, but I've had people pass away in my life. I've had some pretty bad times. I don't think about getting high then.
Yeah.
Like the last time I like thought about getting high, we were sitting in Maui, right? And we were watching a sunset, right? We're on this like vacation with my family. And just like the thought comes across into my mind, like, oh, this would be cool to smoke a joint, right?
Yeah.
And then I entertained it for a second, right? And then I'm like, oh shit, right? And I immediately found a meeting in Maui. Went to a meeting, talked about it, right? And it's funny how the disease works on you. Like, it'll catch you when you're least expecting it, right? And it'll pop in, right? And that's like. The disease of addiction, it's laid out in the book, you know, is the obsession, the compulsion, you know, the complete self-centeredness, right? The obsession would be the thought, right? And I'm pretty acute now when I'm getting like thoughts, right? Whether it be like something about like a drug or some other sort of behavior, right? And I can choose to entertain that thought, right? And then that obsession, you know, it gets larger and larger until the compulsion kicks in, right? And that's the physical aspect. And by the time all that kicks in, fuck, I might do anything, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it's important, like for a guy like me or anybody that's in recovery to have like a support group, right? To have, regular meeting attendance, to have a sponsor, to have people you could check in with, right? Because it's like, I forget who said it, but my friend Brad says it all the time. I think he said it, right? It's impossible to spot self-deception by yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And people, with this disease, are very good at self-deception, right? Denial, rationalization, all this stuff, right? And I could sell myself a false bag of goods real quick, right? And talk myself into making a real bad decision. But I got real strong people around me. I choose to surround myself with people that are like winning in life, right? People that they're doing the next right thing. Like, I don't choose to hang out with the people in recovery that are like doing stupid ass shit, right? Yeah. Because then, you're the sum of who you hang out with, right? Like, you hang around with, 4 fucking broke dudes. There's about to be 5, right? And that's funny because we're like 2 broke dudes. but for the analogy, right?
Yeah. And it I don't know. I think like all the recovery stuff. When I first met you, I thought recovery was like, oh, don't talk about drugs and alcohol in front of EJ.
Yeah.
Like he might go on a bender if we talk
turn
about
into a monster.
Yeah. And I thought it was real
taboo.
Not taboo, like just taboo, and then religious and not relatable.
Yeah.
Right. And now I listen to all the episodes and I watch and a lot of it comes down to just like core things that you need in your life.
Right.
Like the people that you need, good people around you.
Yeah.
If you don't, then you're probably not going to grow as a person. You need to stop the self-deception, because a lot of people go around in life. Like, there's been times in my life where I'm just in a hole, but I keep on telling myself, oh, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. And I'm not addicted to drugs, but it's still like I'm still just not growing. And I guess growth, I think you said it before, when you do drugs for the first time is when you stop getting,
Well, they say that like when you start using on a regular basis, like you're emotionally stuck in that part of your life, right?
Yeah.
So like if I'm, so like when I got clean, I was like emotionally like a 14-year-old or a 12-year-old, right? Like emotionally broken.
Yeah.
But I think that's the misconception too, is like, I mean, it depends on the person. Everybody's different, right? And we live in a society where people like to be like, oh, I'm triggered, yeah. Right? I don't feel that way most of the time, right? I feel like I feel pretty sturdy to where like I can be in a lot of different places, and people could be doing, like, I don't actively hang out with people that are drinking, especially people that are using drugs, right? Yeah. But I could be at a party here and there. I mean, I've been, in the beginning, no, right? Like I stayed away. I was scared, right? But at the same time, right, other people's lives don't change because my life changed, right? Just because I stopped using, I stopped drinking, I stopped partaking in all this stuff doesn't mean that everybody else's life changed, right? But I don't hang out in those places that, like, I don't go to a house where all they do is drink and use drugs, right? Yeah. And I think that perception of the recovering addict, like, oh, we can't talk about certain things, right? Because they're there, right? Yeah. I think that like does more harm to that person, right? Because they already feel different, right? And then when people feel like they have to curb their behaviors because somebody's there, I think it further isolates that person, right? And I mean, everybody's different, right? Like everybody's different. Some people, I hear people in recovery that'll just say like, oh, I can't be around anybody that drinks. But I think that's unrealistic. It's not realistic in life, right? Like today, I like to consider myself like a productive member of society, and I'm going to be at places where people, are drinking, right? A wedding or possibly a funeral reception or a family. I'm not going to not allow my kids to be at Christmas with their cousins because somebody drinks beer, right?
Yeah. And I've heard and most of the time it's people that are brand new to recovery that
Yeah.
have had family and stuff say they're not going to come because they're in recovery, but it's their like first year.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe that's the reason.
And that's a more crucial time. I mean, I was in inpatient treatment for 6 months, right? So I spent 6 months in an isolated environment, and then I came out, and then I was really careful, you know, what I was around. You know, when I came out, you know, the woman that I wanted to be my girlfriend, right, my wife, or Brandy, my significant other, right, like she was still drinking, right? And it's a miracle that I made it out of that phase clean, you know, because I so badly wanted that to work, you know. Thank God that she made the decision, you know, to stop drinking, right? And she hasn't picked up a drink or anything in years, right? And she struggles with it. She doesn't struggle with it like she's not like, oh, I want, but like we'll be somewhere and she'll be like, man, I wish I could have a beer. I'm like, go ahead, have a beer. Like that's up to you, right? Like I'm not going to tell you what you can or can't do, right? Her life is not mine, right? And I love her. Like I love that woman, you know, unconditionally, right? Like it doesn't matter. Are there certain behaviors that I wouldn't be able to tolerate? Yeah, but I mean, you know, she's allowed to make all the choices she wants, right? Like you know, but
well, even doing this podcast, it's been. I'm not gonna say like, okay, I'm part of this podcast, right? I'm not the face of the podcast, but I'm still part of it, right?
Yeah.
So I am an avid drinker. No, I wouldn't say I'm an avid drinker. Like I drink here and there, and then I'm more of an avid marijuana user.
Yeah.
Right. And then like I'm like, man, should I even do that? Like, should I step away from that? And then like I haven't drank, I haven't smoked in forever. Right. It's been a while. And I went out this weekend. I've been working my butt off, and I went out this weekend with my buddy. And you know what? I'm gonna have a drink, but it's still in the back of my head. I was like, man, this ruins people's lives.
Right.
I wonder if I'm an addict. And then I drink.
Normal people don't ponder the question of whether they're an addict.
Well, it's just I'm
just
dealing
fucking
with
with you.
I'm dealing with a different situation. Like I'm dealing with not. I don't want to break any trust with this podcast. Like I don't want it to look bad or whatever. So I'm always wondering about that. And then I drink one drink, and then I have another, and then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go home.
Yeah, I never did that. But I mean, you know, and that's what it is, right? Like, I mean, it's not like you're walking around here like pretending like, oh yeah, I'm in recovery too, right? Like it's just it's what it is, right? And I think that's even more commendable, I guess you could say, is that someone like yourself that's not in recovery but is passionate enough about because like we ain't getting paid shit, right? Like we got a few sponsors, thank you guys very much, right? Like, but I mean, as far as like for the amount of time that especially you put into it, and the time I put into it, and the travel and everything, we ain't getting paid shit, right? And you're doing this like as a passion project. Yeah. So I mean, anybody that like would hate on you for being a part of this, fuck them, right? Turn this shit off. No, but it's just, you know, like, I mean, but everybody's judgmental, right? Like we see it, you know, like I don't see it, you see it, because I don't interact on hardly any of the social media. But like people are fucking mean, right? Yeah. Like people are looking for a reason to fuck somebody's day up, right? Yeah. And anybody that would have something negative to say about you, number one, probably doesn't know you that well, right? And number two, like, who cares?
Did you, when you first got recovered, like how long did it take for you to build your trust back with your family?
I did.
Not just your immediate family. I'm talking about like your aunts, uncles, sisters, brothers.
I mean, everybody was cool with me, right? Like like they were just proud of me, right? Like they were proud of me. I don't know if in the back of their minds they were like, oh, when's he gonna like fucking slip, right? You know, you know, but like the biggest one is Brandy, right? Like, and it's still a process at times, right? Yeah. Like it's still like I did some unbelievable damage to her, right? Yeah. Like the fact that she is still with me and loves me, right, is amazing, right? Yeah. And so there are certain things that I deal with, and she's dealing with stuff, right? And so that's still a process, right? Like, I try my best to make sure I check in with her, like when I'm going somewhere. I don't want to give her any reason not to trust me, right? Yeah. But like when I got home today, went to look for my phone so I could like play some stupid ass game for like 10 minutes. I'm like, where's my phone? I walk in the kitchen, she's got it behind her back. I'm like, what are you doing, right? But it doesn't even bother me, right? Because I ain't got nothing to worry about today. Yeah. Like before, I would have freaked out, right? Because she might have went on my phone and found some shit, right? But like I don't even worry about it now, right? I mean, it's just what it is, right? I don't know, man.
And do you find yourself like working on yourself daily? Like what's your routine as of right now? Like what's your routine of working on recovery today?
Honestly,
yeah.
My routine right now is fucked, right? like to be honest with you, yeah. Like I mean, I had, like in for me, it's an ebb and flow. Like sometimes I'll be like doing everything I should be doing, right? And other times, like right now, like I was in this phase where I was waking up at like 4:40 in the morning, a cup of coffee on the way out the door. Yeah. Sitting there reading my daily meditations, having some quiet time, meditation. And then
your coach quit.
Yeah,
and you don't have that
going to Muay Thai and like working out for it, getting all this shit done before my kids even woke up, right? Yeah. And like I was just, just feeling good, right? Yeah. I mean, I was physically breaking down, right? Yeah. But I mean, and I really haven't found. Like I'm the type of person that I feel like I need like some sort of program, right? Yeah. Like I have to be on a regiment, right? And ever since I stopped doing that, like I've been erratic. I've been all over the place, right? And it shows in all the aspects of my life, right? Like I find myself, feeling. I wouldn't say I'm white knuckling it, right? But at the same time, white knuckling is when I barely learned the term. Yeah, it's when like a fresh is that right? A brand new addict comes in. No, it's like somebody that's not doing anything for their fucking recovery, right? And they're just like holding on their fucking white knuckling it, right? Just holding on for dear life, right? Yeah. I don't feel like that. But I know that I need to get a regimen down, right? Like I need to get back on my step work. I need to get in tune with my higher power more, pray on it a little bit more, take some time for myself, right? And for me, what that would take would be like getting up early in the morning again, hours before anybody wakes up. And so I'm aware of where I'm at, right? But sometimes I'm like a pig that just wants to play in the shit, right? And that's kind of like where I've been at, right? And I keep biting off more, right? More commitments, more stuff with the kids, more, and I fear that they're missing out, right? So we're always doing more with them. And I only got so much time in the day, right? Yeah. And so, yeah, man, like right now, meeting attendance, I'm keeping in contact with a lot of people in my support group. I consider you one of those people in my support group, even though you're not in recovery. Yeah. And service work. That's what I've been doing lately for my recovery, and it's not enough, right? I need to be doing more, but I'm okay today, right? Like I feel good. I'm not going to go pick up and use, right? I'm aware of my behaviors, right? I'm still making choices in the best interest of my loved ones, right? Like when I make a choice, I stop and think like, who's this going to affect, right? How's this going to affect my wife, my kids, my family, right? Like I'm conscious of all those things, right? I'm not caught up in self, I'm doing the things I need to do to stay clean. But right now I'm in a point of complacency that a lot of people would say isn't safe, right? Like, yeah. But they even say in our literature, your own personal program, right? What works for me may not work for you, right? And so, I'm gonna keep doing the things. I'm gonna keep adding to, right? But staying plugged in the recovery process, looks different for everybody, man. And it's just Like, that's where I'm at right now. Like, honestly, I'm kind of fucking coasting, right?
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily a good thing.
Would you say, like, you're at a point in your life where you're finally, like, you're stable, like, you got a good home, you got, like, things are not chaotic from drugs and all the mess you were in before. Now it's just life and trying to, like, sorry, I'm all over the place, but a recovering addict, they finally get recovered, right?
Never recovered,
No, okay,
Jesse.
never recovered. But they kick the drug, meaning like they stop using and they're in recovery, and they're clean for the meantime, and they're able to get a job. They finally get that job. Now, like, just regular life.
Yeah.
Right. And do recovering addicts talk about that? Like,
oh yeah,
it's
a life program, man.
Yeah.
Like, you get the drugs out of the way so you can deal with life, right?
Yeah.
Like, life is the reason a lot of people use. Be careful what you pray for, because the shit you pray for is going to become your hardships, right? Like, parenting. Fucking, like, when I was in treatment, I just want to be with my kids, right? I just want to like be there for it. And all my fucking troubles over the last couple of months have to do with my fucking kids, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay, right? Like, I get to be there today, right? Like, it would be a lot harder on them if I wasn't there, right? But it's hard. Like, we constantly talk about, like, we can't control the outcomes of situations, right? We can't control people, places, or things. And I'm good with that, right? Except for when it comes to my kids, right?
Yeah.
It becomes difficult because you want them to have an easier path, right? And taking a step back and letting them fall, right? And letting them deal with the consequences of their actions, right? Like, that shit's hard, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want them to deal with the pain that you dealt with, right? And especially, like, when you could see them walking down a certain path and it ain't good, right? And you can tell them, you could try to help them and direct them, but you can't do it for them, right? It's definitely, and as we're talking, we got my kids staring in the glass at us, right?
They're walking by, right?
Man, but you know what, and like, we haven't, like, should we get into it? Like, do people want to know, like, what I was like in my addiction?
Yeah. Like,
should we talk about that?
Yeah, I was going off of, like, just your recovery now. But yeah, like, so I don't know if you were comfortable. Are you comfortable with talking about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've let everybody else on the podcast show their ass for the world to see, right? Like, it's only fair. Like, I mean, my using career started early, right?
Yeah.
Like, it started early. Like, my household, like, I had two parents that loved me, right? My parents were really young when they had my sister. They were, like, I think 17, 18 when they were pregnant with Adrian. And then I came around, like, 2 years later. And so I was raised by children, right? Like, I was raised by children. And what ended up happening, right, I was raised around, like, a lot of stuff, right? Like, they were doing, like, what 20-year-olds do, right? They were partying. There's a lot of stuff going on. So a lot of the things that I seen, like, growing up, like, was that of living with, like, 20, 21-year-olds, right? And then further emphasized by, like, my family. I'm Portuguese, Basque. My mom's side of the family parties heavy, right? And so we'd have these big family celebrations, even our cultural celebrations, right? Like, people were just, getting fucked up, right? Like, that's what I seen, right? And that's what I seen as normal. That's how you interact socially with people. And so that's, like, sample size of one, right?
That was your weekend.
That was just what people did around me. That's what adults did around me.
Yeah.
That's what cool adults did around me, like, I thought, right? All the people I knew in my life that were cool were all, like, drinking all the time and doing God knows whatever, And so I think the first thing I used was cigarettes, right? You hear a lot of people have cigarettes are a drug, but they change the way you feel when you're fucking, like, 11 years old, smoke a cigarette. That shit gets you lit, right? Yeah. And and then I, like, my parents had, like, the party house, man. Like, it was crazy. Like, I remember being young And like my mom was like the Mother Teresa patron saint of the drunk high school kids, right? So like if somebody was like alcohol poison or something, they would bring them to my parents' house, right? My mom would take it. So I was exposed to like all this kind of stuff, and then like people would hang out. Like when my sister was a freshman, like a bunch of old people would come out and they would play ping pong in our backyard and smoke weed and shit. Like all this shit was allowed to happen around my house. We had older kids in the neighborhood. You know, my parents were still cool and young, right? And so all this shit would be going around. And I remember the first time I hit a joint, I was young, man. I probably was like in 6th grade. And they were playing ping pong, and they put the joint down the side of the table, right? And I just grabbed it and hit it, right?
Yeah.
I don't even think I got high at that time, but, you know. And then, like, older people would, like, pick me up. I'd ride around and with this older guy, and he was a cool guy. I'm actually still friends with him today. He's got, like, this crazy government job. He, like, works for CIA or some shit. I don't know what the fuck he does. But, like, they'd get me high and laugh at me and shit, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, like, that was – like emphasized to me, like that's cool, like using, getting loaded, all that shit, like that's what's cool. And so, you know, junior high starts, and I find the guys like me, right? Like I remember being in, I think I was in 7th, 8th grade, and my dad would drop me off at a friend's house, and they had a broke down little single cab truck on the side of the house, and like 5 of us would pile into this thing and like hot box it before we walked to school.
Yeah.
Right. And I have a daughter that's a freshman. Right. I was like, fuck, man, that's what I used to do when I was that age. Right. And yeah, that's how it was, man. Like I found a group of guys that all just used. Right. And it progressed into high school. I mean, you know, cocaine, acid, ecstasy, like whatever there was, we were using. Right. But still, all along the while, like stuff was normal for me. My life progressed like normally, it felt like.
Those are just you thought were childhood behaviors.
Yeah, that's what I thought was normal, right? Even now, I kind of like, you know, now I got my own kid, I'm like, no, you ain't doing that, right? I think we drug tested my daughter again today. But, you know, in the bugaboo that I caught was like my freshman year after football, I had a shoulder surgery, right? And they started prescribing Vicodin to me, like on a regular basis, right? And I really liked fucking Vicodin. Like I liked opiates. I liked the way they made me feel, you know. And then I had a second surgery, like I think it was after my senior year, you know. And then like pills were always in you know, that was pills, right?
And that was in the middle of when opiates were like strong.
Yeah.
Right? They were giving you Oxy.
Well, I never got Oxy then. Oxy was part of my story. That's when shit changed. Yeah. Right?
It was Vicodin.
It was Vicodin, right? Yeah. I would get these big bottles like this, full of like 750, big old horse pills, right? Yeah. And there was no warning label like, hey, these might be addictive, right? Or like the doctor wouldn't warn you like, hey, you might end up, you know. And I can remember like when it all changed, right? It was like a couple years after I graduated. It's probably like 2003. We had a bunch of friends that went to school up in Chico and went up there for Halloween, right? And they were chopping lines on a dresser, right? And we were all fucking dressed up like idiots. I had a big old fucking cowboy hat on, right? We were getting ready to go out. And they were mixing cocaine with Oxycontin, right? And they were chopping it down. And I remember hitting it, right? I remember snorting it, boom. And, like, everything had changed, right? Yeah. Like, I can remember that exactly how that went down, right? And I remember puking blood, right? Like, after hitting it, and then going and hitting more, right? Like, that's insanity. Like, you don't puke blood and then go back to the reason why, right? But I knew things, like, things were escalating, right? Yeah. Like, and after that, it was just... It was on, you know. I came back to Los Banos and I found ways and means to get more, you know. I had a buddy that delivered for a pharmacy and we linked up, and he would go drop off all the drugs and he'd go back later on that night and buy them all back from the people, you know, he dropped them off, and it was just on and cracking, man. And from that point, like, that's all that mattered, right? We would just snort Oxycontin all day, right? And that was before I had a family or anything, and we would run out and I'd get fucking sick, right? And I didn't think I was doing heroin. Like what I know today that like when we used to get those Oxycontins, you would rub the coating off, and it was just a pill, and it's pure synthetic heroin, right?
Yeah.
And I wasn't aware that I was actually using heroin, right?
Was that because this is given from a doctor? This is not government. This is like educated pills.
Yeah,
like,
it's government issued heroin, right? Pharmaceutical grade fucking heroin.
Yeah.
Made to ruin a whole fucking generation, right? And I was fucking hooked, man. And I would run out and I'd get sick, right? I know today that I was going through withdrawal. At the time, I wasn't even aware of what the fuck was going on, right? And about the third or fourth time, I don't know why we ran out, but we were out, right? And I was going through it bad, and I reached out. I called my parents, hey, I need some fucking help. I think I got an issue, right?
Yeah. Were you living at home at the time? Or?
No, I was living at a house over across town. I had one roommate then, and I told him I was fucked up, right? And he knew I was fucked up, And so my parents, they took me and all they knew to do is like, hey, like God bless them, right? They stuck me in a room, right? And I went through withdrawals and I could remember the way that felt. It feels like your fucking ribs are coming out of your body. You're just, like 4 days of just hell, right?
And how old were you at the time?
Oh, I was in my early 20s.
Okay.
I was in my early 20s. And I knew I needed some help. I knew something wasn't right. And my mom was reaching out to resources she had, and then we had one friend who knew of some 12-step meetings in Los Banos, and so I was referred to go to these meetings, right? And I showed up to my first 12-step meeting probably about 5 days clean, right? And I was just broke down enough to try something, right? And I knew I didn't want to fucking use anymore. And I think I might have still been smoking weed, because that was always my cure to everything, right? It was just, I always thought I'd smoke weed till the day I died, right? And I went in and I heard, they were very small back then. There was like 5 people in a room, and we sat there and I heard the stories, and I think I even shared my first meeting. I don't even know what I said. I remember I was crying, right?
What's up, motherfuckers?
Yeah, I wasn't that cool. I wasn't that cool.
Yeah.
And I stuck around for a little while, right? Like I knew I wanted to stop doing drugs, but like I wasn't into all the other shit they were talking about, right? Like all the other, character stuff, and I wasn't even fucking hearing it, to be honest with you. Like I wasn't ready for recovery, and I picked up a little 6 months.
Was it because that you seen these people that were living in hell, right? Like they were, like their life seemed unmanageable, and you were just young, and you still kind of like.
Well, no, most of the people there had like a lengthy amount of clean time, right?
What was it that you didn't resonate with?
I didn't identify with them, because my recovery was just Los Banos, right? Today I know recovery is huge, right? There's recovering addicts all over the world, right? But I just didn't identify, right? I didn't participate in all the recovery stuff that they had to offer. Like I didn't go to the conventions. I didn't go to out-of-town meetings. It's not like I wasn't invited. I don't even remember if anybody invited me. I don't even think it was a fucking, I would go to meetings and stuff, and then all I knew is I couldn't hang out with anybody, right? They would tell me that shit, like you have to fucking change everything. Yeah. So I'd sit at home with my fucking dog, right? I'd go to these meetings, and I didn't want to connect with these people really. I did end up picking up a sponsor, right? I really didn't do any of the work. I don't think I really called them too much. I'd call them with like fucking crazy, stupid shit, right? I got freaking out, right? And he'd tell me like, I'd call him, oh, this is going to the fucking blah, blah, and he'd be like, oh, well, you're like, did you write about it? No. Like, well, you're the problem, right? Like, fuck you, you're the problem. I wouldn't tell him that, but in my head, like, whatever, dude, fuck you. Like, you're supposed to fix me, right? I got a sponsor's supposed to fix me, right? Yeah. And just like, but they were pouring into me, right? Like they were planting seeds that would later on blossom, right? But it took a long time, like I picked up a little 6 months, had a little relapse, and picked up a few more months, and then I remember how it went. I was out my old coach's house and I was training. Like we were like doing some hitting mitts or sparring or some shit like that. And I looked at him like, hey, you want to go smoke some weed? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, cool, me too. Right. And boom, fucking off and running, dude. And I thought like, oh, I'm just going to smoke weed. Right. Like that's all I'm going to do. Maybe have a couple of drinks. And, before I knew it, like I was fucking eating. And I always like, this is how I lied to myself. I was like, as long as I eat the pills and I'm not snorting them, I'm good.
I've heard you say that before.
Right?
It's so stupid.
Right? But these are the fucking lies you'll tell yourself, right? Like, and so that's what I did, man. And like along the way, like they say I got on the Insta family plan, right? Yeah. Like I ended up, like I'm like using successfully in my mind, right? I'm just eating a few pills and I'm smoking weed and shit. And then Brandy comes in my life. I start raising a daughter, right? So then I gotta figure out how to get more money. So I start selling the drugs I'm using, right? And so then there's more drugs around. I'm using more drugs, right?
What pushed you to that? That like, I mean, on the outside looking in, like your family is they own a business. A lot of them are. I mean, you have a good family.
Yeah.
Like what pushed you to that life of? I mean, it's a life of crime, right? Like.
Yeah. No.
What pushed you to that?
I just liked using drugs, man.
Yeah.
Like, to be honest with you, like, I really liked fucking getting high, right? Yeah. And at a point, the fucking party stops, right?
And so you said, I'm doing this so I can support. That was your excuse, was I'm supporting my family.
Yeah, I'm supporting my family. I need extra money, right? Yeah. And risking everything. Like, I was selling drugs out of the fucking flower shop. I was doing stupid ass shit, right? Like, but it
was to support the habit.
The habit, right? Yeah. And I had extra money. Like I had more money when I went to rehab than when I got out, right? Right? Like my story doesn't go to where like that wasn't a problem. Like I can hustle, right? Yeah. Like I wasn't like some cool ass fucking drug dealer or anything, but I could make a little money, right? Yeah. And so all that shit escalated, man. Like the amount of pills that I was eating on a daily basis before I got clean, right? Like I was upwards of eating like 30-some Norcos a day. I was eating Xanax bars and Somas. Like I was in the upwards of like 40-some pills a day, right? And selling 4 times that amount to keep up with my habit. And, I had fucking 2 jobs, right? And like, and the other behaviors that come along with it, right? I was deceitful. I lied, right? I cheated, right? And it wasn't my fucking drug use that brought me to my knees, right? Like, I had tried to get clean, I remember the October before I actually got clean in June, I tried to kick, right? I told my wife I was going to kick, right? We had a baby coming, right? So I needed to get clean, right? And I got clean for but I got my version of clean, right? Like I detoxed from the drugs, it was another like 5-day. And this one was different, like detoxing from benzos, like psych meds, like Somas and Xanax, plus the Norco. So you got the opiate thing going on, and then you got the brain thing going on. Like, it was rough, man. And you think I'd have stayed clean, right? But in my genius idea, the way I was going to manage it was I was going to manage it by, like, eating all these THC pills while I was coming down. Like, I was eating fucking, like, hash oil and shit, right? And then I'm like, okay, well, I'll eat a 1.5 grams of mushrooms every day, right? Right? So this was my version of how it, like, and
at this time, did you have anybody in your ear that was trying to help you, that was trying to, hey, EJ, like, you're doing... This is not good. Like,
I think Brandy was, but I wasn't trying to hear it,
right?
Like, I think she was telling me, like, you got to fucking figure something out, right? But I didn't really know. Like, my sponsor would come into the flower shop, he would come to the flower shop periodically to buy his wife flowers, and he'd ask me, how you doing? I know you could tell I was fucked up, right? And I would always tell him, oh, you came in to check on me. He's like, no, I came in to buy my wife flowers, dude, right? And I would see, like, people like George around town, right? And I would talk to George, and like, they were always really nice to me, right? They never made me feel like shit because I wasn't clean or anything else. And so I knew that, and Jared would hit me up for flowers, right? And he had my cell phone number, right?
Yeah.
And when I was real fucked up, I wouldn't get back to him, right? You know, and so there was a line, there was a safety raft there for me, you know? But things escalated, man. Like, you know, I tried to stay clean my way a few times, and things just, you know, just snowballed again, right? And we had the kid, and Brandy was clean, and she did right by our family, and like, I always feel bad about, like, when my youngest daughter was born, like, I was fucked up, man. And there's a lot of pictures of us in the, you know, in the labor room, and like, I'm fucking crying, right? And a lot of people think I'm crying because, like, it's an emotional moment, but I'm crying because I feel like a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I could feel it. Like, I could feel the weight of this thing on me, you know? Like, feelings like they'd probably be better off without me, all this shit. Like, shit, Brandy didn't even take any pain meds when she had her baby, and I was on fucking an enormous amount of medication, right? It's fucking horrible, right? And it didn't stop me, though. Yeah. Like, I kept on fucking using, right? And what stopped me was Brandy caught me doing some shit one more time, right? And she had a fucking enough, right? And she had enough of my ass. Like, she came to say, I'm gonna do this without you. Fuck you, right? I'm done with you. And you know, and I was stuck looking at me, right? And what I saw, I didn't like, man. I was physically deteriorating, you know. I was barely over 100 and some pounds. You know, I looked like I was on fucking crystal meth, you know, but all I was doing, like, was eating pills, smoking Marlboro Reds, and drinking Red Bulls. Like, that was my diet, and Mountain Dew, right? And I was fucked up, man, and I knew I needed to change, right? Like, it honestly went, like, I tried to chase her around, trying to explain myself to her, like, fucking complete insanity, like, no, you know, and then I'm driving down Mercy Springs, and I'm thinking, I'm like, fucking selfish, right? Like, I'm like, fuck, I should just kill myself, right? Like, I'm in that mode, right? No, I'm not gonna kill myself. I'm obsessed with myself. Why would I kill the thing I love more than anything, right? Yeah. Like, you know, and I called my sponsor's phone number, man, and he didn't.
He wasn't your sponsor at the time.
No, he wasn't, right? And he had sponsored me like almost 10 years before that, right? Yeah. And without hesitation, he told me, you know, come to my house. Right. This is where I'm at. Come here now. And I did. And his sponsor was there from out of state. And he told me, you know, hey, we're going to this meeting. You want to come? I think you should come. Right. And I went. And his sponsor and his wife at the time seen what was going on. They're like, oh, we'll go in this car. You take him. Right. You know, and I cried and babbled all the way. Oh, poor is me. Woe is me. Blah, 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 blah. You know, and we drove this meeting. They sat and had a nice dinner before the meeting. I fucking walked around the outside of the restaurant like a psychopath, fucking punched a metal pole, busted up my hand. I was just like psychotic, right? And I sat in that meeting, looked at like the ground right in front of my feet for an hour, didn't hear a goddamn thing. We drove home. I fucking babbled to him for another 45 minutes. You know, when we got close to the town, I just told him, you know, thank you, Jared, right? And he looked at me and he's like, thank you, right? I'm like, what the fuck do you mean? He's like, you're showing me it ain't no good out there no more, right? It's still no good. And hopefully you stick around long enough to understand what I'm saying to you, right? Like, today I understand, right? And, you know, and I'd like to say that I stayed clean from that point forward, but I got back into my car and I had a fat-ass bag of pills, and I ate a handful of them, and I went and sold the rest of the bag. But I did start going to meetings, right? And I wasn't clean when I was going to meetings, right? I started going to meetings again. And I'd go to the meetings and I'd share all kinds of crazy shit, and I'd lie about clean time, collect fucking key tags I didn't belong, so odd, right? Like, but I knew I was saving face if I was showing up there. Yeah. And I knew I wanted what these people had. I just didn't know how to get there. Right? Like, I couldn't stop fucking using. This thing had a grip on me. I couldn't stop fucking using. And I felt so bad about myself. I was so engulfed in shame and guilt and everything else. And I was reaching out for help, right? Like, even Rich, my buddy Rich, he fucking tried to take me to a rehab in Merced. They didn't want to take me, right? And, you know, and I was like...
Why didn't they want to take you?
I don't know if they didn't. I don't even remember, to be honest. I don't know if they didn't have room, or I was coming off of opiates. I don't know what their reason was, but it just wasn't supposed to be, right? That's not where I was supposed to end up. And so I remember I was at the flower shop, and I had enough, man. I couldn't, and I knew there was one person, right, that I used with, that I grew up with, that was clean, right? And I knew he had went to a program in Stockton, and I reached out to him, you know, and I said, hey, man, hey, Ian, I need some fucking help, dude, right? And he told me he'd been waiting for that call from me, right? Because we had ran into each other, you know, a couple months before then, and I had fucked some shit up again. I was telling him how shitty my life was, but I didn't got a problem though, right? I don't got a fucking problem. And so he's like, you know what? I might have an answer for you. He said, I'm gonna call you back with a solution. If you don't want to take it, don't ever fucking call me again. Yeah. Right. And he called me back later that night, and he's like, man, they got a bed for you at the Salvation Army in Stockton. You can come to my house. I'm gonna take you to the Hope Harbor in Lodi, which is like a homeless shelter. You could detox on my couch, and I remember that night because I remember, like, I was excited, right? I was scared and excited, right? I went to a meeting, right? I went to a meeting, and they were all cheering for me, you know. Certain people in my life were like, you can't go away for 6 months, you know, like, people at the meeting were telling me you need to go, right? Take this opportunity, change your life, you know, and I was scared. And I remember that night, like, not wanting to use, right? But there was drugs available to me, right, in the form of some pills, and I vividly remember not wanting to use the drugs and using against my own free will, right? Which won't make sense to people that are, like, listening to this that haven't been through this experience. But I remember crying, putting the pills in my mouth, spitting the pills out on the floor, on all fours, crying, picking them back up, putting them in my mouth, spitting them out, picking them back, you know, and doing this, right? And then taking the pills, right? Using against my own free will. And that was the last time I ever used, right? And, like, I keep that memory for me, right? Like, I don't ever want to be in that position again, right? Like for me, like, getting high is like getting on a roller coaster, right? But being high as an addict is like getting on the fucking roller coaster and then not being able to turn that motherfucker off, right? Yeah. It's real fun on the first couple loops, but right after a while it gets fucking bad, you know. And yeah, man. And Ian picked me up the next day, and I detoxed on his couch, right? And it wasn't like a cushy detox. It was like we're detoxing, and then we're going over to his in-laws, and we're ripping out a fucking deck in the 100-degree weather, you know. And then I went to a program for 6 months, man, and I learned so much in that program.
And how did you feel going into, because that, from what you tell me, that program was like incarceration.
I mean, the door works. I mean, you can leave whenever you want. Yeah. You know, it's very regimented. It's like it's a work program, right? Like, even like I chaired a men's meeting, right? And I was in there, and it was a pretty big meeting, and there was a bunch of guys from Recovery House there, right? When I told them that I completed the Salvation Army, there was a big gasp in the room. They're like, right? Because addicts don't like structure, right? Yeah. And work but it teaches you those basic life things, discipline, right? But I mean, I was ready, man. I was ready to change my life, and I didn't conform right away. I had a hard time through there, man. I had a hard time picking and choosing, you know, like, it's a religious program, it's a work program. I don't really subscribe to their fucking religion, right? Yeah. I understand what work is, you know, but, like, I was so broken, like, I borrowed their higher power for, like, my first few months there. I even, like, started listening to fucking Christian music. I'm like, yeah, but, you know, like, all this shit, right? And you know, it's funny because I went from, like, this extreme all the way to this extreme, and then, like, I find myself somewhere in the middle now, right? Like my relationship with my higher power is evolving, right? I don't really have, like, a name for God. I just use God. It's easy. It works. Yeah. But it's about finding yourself, right?
That's what I was about to say. Like, it's like how Like, I feel like the way you talk about it, it was you trying to figure out who you were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the whole process, man, is like trying to figure out who EJ is, right? Like what makes EJ tick, right? It's okay for EJ to be EJ, right? Like I don't have to be this way because it pleases you, or I don't have to be this way to fit in, right?
Yeah.
But I got to start trying to figure out who I am. You know, not only my defects, but my assets. You know, like I am a good person, right? Like I made a lot of bad decisions, right? And coming to understand that, like I have a disease, right? I don't have a more, like I was reading through the basic text and it came upon a point that says, you know, that you have a disease, not a moral deficiency. And like, wait a minute, I'm not a fucking bad person.
Yeah.
Like I'm not like just wired wrong, you know, I'm not damned to make bad decisions over and over again, right? Like I could change this, right? Like that was really appealing to me, man. I was so desperate. I was willing to take anything, and I threw myself in, right? I threw myself hard, right? I mean, I got myself like a really strong foundation, you know, in the program, and it's kind of carried me through the last few years because my program, like I hear people talking, like a lot of people that we talk to on here, man, they got some fucking amazing recovery, right? Yeah. And I want what they have, right? And a lot of times I just fucking skate by. I just need a little bit. Just give me a little bit to get by, right? But I did get such a solid foundation, you know, like shout out to like Stockton, right? Like these recovery at work meetings and the Surrender to Live group and all these people that just like just bleed into you, right? And my sponsor who's fucking walked me through so much, right? Like done stuff for my family that like a sponsor ain't supposed to do, right? He just happened to do CrossFit with my wife, right? And like he wouldn't go to bat for me like and say, oh, EJ's a great guy or anything like that, because I wasn't, right? But, you know, he was there, right? He was there for her, right? Because he didn't sponsor me while I was in rehab. I had a local sponsor, my buddy Ian, right? And then when I came back, I ended up asking him to sponsor me again, you know, but all the while he's been there for me in one form or another, right? Like we're not like a lot of these people in this program, they're like, oh, I love you, brother, and fucking hugging and shit. Like we don't really do that, right? Like we're not like I don't know. I can count the amount of times Jared's told me he loved me on fucking like 3 fingers probably, you know, like
what's up marriage advice, like love languages.
Yeah, we're like you know, like, but we're the same, like, and I want what he has, and what he has is he thinks before he speaks, right? He's a man of integrity, right? Like his words and his feet are moving in the same direction at all times, because I'm the kind of guy, I poke holes in shit, right? Like I'm looking for your faults, right? So I could fucking be like, nah, don't trust him, don't like him, right? And the dude's solid, right? Like in so many ways, right? And I've had the opportunity to watch him walk through his own stuff, right? And how he reacts and what he does. And the dude's solid, right? And I couldn't be more fortunate to have somebody like that in my life, right? And you know, like recovery's just, it's taught me so much, right? Like the things that I wanted when I started to get clean aren't the things that I want today, right? Like I've had an amazing spiritual awakening. Like the blessings were there all along. I was just too fucking numbed up and doled out to see what I had in my life. I have a full life, you know. I have a amazing family, you know, extended, and like my kids and everything. Like, you know, it's crazy, man. Like, just, I'm not gonna cry. Don't worry, I don't fucking cry. I'm emotionally dead inside. No, but it's just, you know, like, I don't know, man. Like, the gifts are so many, right? And, you know, just like being able to watch my kids grow up, right? And of course it's frustrating and stuff, but I got like 2 amazing kids, right? Super talented, both completely individual. I got an amazing wife. I got to watch her and support her, like go back to school with 2 kids and get her fucking master's degree. Yeah. Right? Like,
in a way, that was like the ultimate reward from recovery, because she trusted you to do that.
Yeah.
Like she said, okay, you take the reins while I go do this. And she's telling a recovering addict that means you've earned her fucking trust.
Yeah. Well, and normal people call me and confide in me today, right? Or they call me and ask me for my advice, right? And like Los Banos, like everybody knows me in this town, right? Like I'm not hiding from anybody. Like everybody knows, like, you know, like I think almost everybody in Los Banos knows a lot of my shit, right? And that's okay, right? Because what people say and think about me is none of my fucking business, right? My job is just to keep moving forward, right? Whatever that looks like, right? You know, and worry about those fucking kids, right? And be that sounding board, you know, that support system for them. That's my job, right? Because what I wanted to be, you know, I just wanted to be a good fucking dad, right? And I know I need to set higher goals, right? Because I've achieved a lot of these things, right? And that's the next process for me is setting new goals and like, what do I want to do? Like I'm a big boy now, fucking 40 years old, right? You know, like what do I want to do in my life? Like what does the next chapter look like? You know, I don't know, you know, I don't think anybody, you know, you never know what life, the only promise that the program makes is that an addict, any addict can stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live, right? Yeah. And the rest of that stuff's all up to you, right? And in a lot of ways, I'm complacent, right? Like, I don't run the perfect recovery program, you know? But, like, what people should understand that if I could fucking do it, you could do it, right? Yeah. And if you chase this recovery thing half as hard as you're out there chasing that bag, man, the rewards are going to be amazing, right? Like, and it doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, like we all fit in, right? If you end up in a 12-step program, you paid for your seat tenfold, right? Whether it's you paid for it with your money, all the money you spent on dope, with the blood that you left out there, the tears, whatever that looks like, man, you earn your seat, right? And people just need to give themselves a break, you know? You know, it's a want some, get some program, man. You know, but
if you could tell, because you kind of answered that your routine question at the end, like if there's, what would you, and instead of saying like, what would you tell that person that needs help, like looking back at your recovery and you finding like people like your sponsor, and what would you tell that early 20-year-old? Like, what would you what advice would you give him, that young 20-year-old EJ?
that young 20-year-old EJ ain't listening to that 40-year-old EJ, right? Yeah. Like sometimes we got to go out there and bleed some more, right? Like that's just the nature of it. You're not done until you're fucking done, right? And I've been clean long enough to understand that you can't want this for somebody else. Yeah. You can't give a gift to somebody that's not willing to fucking receive it, right? But what I would tell somebody, you know, is God don't make junk, right? Like that's just it, right? One of the pastors said at the Salvation Army, and it's the truth. God don't make junk. Like you weren't put here on this earth to use dope until the day you die, right? And I got an opportunity to tell a guy this, right? Like, you know, if you use, right, if you just keep using, like that's how people are going to remember you, right? Is that really what you want to leave on this earth, right? Like EJ was just a dirty fucking dope fiend who used until the fucking day he died, right? Yeah. He was a piece of shit, right? Because in a lot of, you know, like being fair and looking at the way I lived my life before I got clean, I was a piece of shit, right? Wasn't a good dad, right? Wasn't a good spouse. The fucking liar, manipulator, fucking cheater. I was a piece of shit, right? Yeah. And if I'd have died of my addiction, people would have been justified saying, yeah, that motherfucker was a piece of shit, right? Yeah. You know? But I get an opportunity to leave a different legacy now, right? I get an opportunity to help people. I get an opportunity to put positive out into the world, right? And I'm not positive all the time, right? I fall short of that all the time. But I'm there to help people when they need help, right? And that's the legacy I could leave today, right? Because I have an opportunity to stay clean just for today, right? And we get an opportunity to live our best lives, right? And leave behind something more powerful than anything, right? It is a message of hope, right? That an addict any addict could stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live, right? And be a productive member of society. Be a good father, right? Be that sturdy figure in somebody's life. Be a friend, right? Be a brother, be a son, right? You don't have to fucking die a dope fiend, right? You don't have to die and people look at you like, because God don't make junk, right? Like, you ain't a piece of shit, right? Like, if somebody's listening to this right now and they think they can't, I bet you can, right? Yeah. You can, right? That's just, like, the lie is dead. We do recover, right? And that rings true. Like, I could go into a room and see, 20 miracles, right? Anybody that makes it out of this thing's a fucking miracle, but nobody could do it for you, right? I mean, I firmly believe that people prayed me into recovery, right? But, if I wasn't willing to change, that shit wasn't going to happen, right? It just wasn't going to happen. So, don't give up, don't give up. And you're not fine, right? If you're sitting there and you're putting something in your body and you can't stop, no, you're not okay. It's not going to get better unless you make a decision to fucking make it better, right? And you got to fucking, grab yourself and pick yourself up and ask for help, right? Like, ask for help. That's okay. Anybody, right? There's somebody, I think Willie said, like, there's already somebody there waiting to help you, right? You just got to ask for help.
I mean, that person came into the flower shop looking for flowers your sponsor.
Yeah,
was looking for
it was there, man. Like, God puts the people in your life, right? It's just whether or not you're willing to accept the help, right? It's a really simple process, right? But for somebody that doesn't want to change, they ain't never gonna change, right? But for those that there's a program out there for people like us, right? And it's tough at first, right? But I mean, it's always tough. Life is fucking tough, right? How many times have you heard somebody like, "Oh, today was a tough day. I need to go get a fucking drink," right? And it's funny, like, people talk shit about people in recovery, and they'll be like, "Oh, those pussies need this and that." No, this pussy don't need nothing to change the way he feels, right? Yeah. I live life on life's terms. I fucking step up when it's time, and I don't put anything in my body, no fucking matter what, right? And I live clean, just for today, right? So, yeah. You think we did an hour?
Yeah, I think it's more than an hour. Yeah.
Cool.
More than an hour. Yeah. Thanks, you guys, for listening.
That's it.
Follow, subscribe, all that stuff. It's been a journey producing this podcast, and guys.
Yeah, and if you got a fat sack of money you want to throw at us so we can get out of town and start interviewing more people, we'd like that too.
What EJ's saying is that if you guys want to sponsor the podcast, let us know.
Yeah, we need new mics. We need travel expenses. We could bring you a lot better show if we had something to do it with, but we're making do. So thank you guys very much for paying attention to what we're doing. Man, and if you're clean just for today, that's a miracle, man. That's a big fucking deal, just for today.